Hey everybody, I'm Ted Price from Insomniac Games. On today's episode of the Game Maker's Notebook, I chatted with Ilari Kuittinen, who is the CEO, co-founder, and managing director at Housmarque. Now, Housmarque is the Finnish developer behind last year's award-winning game, Returnal. As some of our listeners may recall, I've talked to Harry Kruger, who's the creative director for Returnal, on a previous episode of the Game Maker's Notebook. On that episode, Harry went into great depth on the making of Returnal. But today, Ilari and I talked about Housmarque. Ilari shared some of the ups and downs of Housemarque's almost 30-year history. We talked about a lot of big industry topics, including growth, company culture, and balancing well-being with game quality. And he had some excellent strategic advice for anyone considering starting up a new developer today. Please join us. Hey, Ilari, welcome.
Hey, hi, Ted. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's awesome. You and I get to talk pretty regularly as peers within the Sony universe, but it's really nice to be able to have this opportunity to ask you a lot of questions about Housemarque, being running a team the way you do, and hopefully provide some really great advice for anybody who is interested in entering the industry or who's growing their own company.
That sounds great.
Well, I'd love to just throw out a random comment and a random question for you. Maybe a little snarky, but does having founded the longest running game studio in Finland make you feel old sometimes? And before you answer, I feel comfortable joking with you about this because we're about the same age.
We are Gen Xers for sure, and it's as you know, years go by quite quickly. So you suddenly are here like after 26, 27. Well, we started the 28th year as a company, and we started. Both the co-founders, me and Harri, started their first small studios a couple of years earlier. So it's started to be nearly 30 years ago. So, but when it's fun, time flies by.
That's a great point. It actually keeps all of us sort of mentally young, I think, even though physically we don't. It's kind of hard to stop that aging process.
Yeah, well, that's tricky. But I think luckily you can do quite a bit. And you might have a gym in your house or in your room. You are doing the interviewing.
Yeah, that is true. You and I were joking before the podcast that I'm waiting for somebody to comment on the fact that I have my gym in my office just because it's convenient and I can't put it anywhere else. But you're right. I mean, I think staying healthy in this industry is something that can really help us. And you obviously do stay healthy. Is living in Finland pretty conducive to that?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of the temperatures variations can be pretty brutal. And I think as we have very dark winters, I'm not sure whether that's very good for your mental health. It can really get into you. Like it's dark most of the day during the winter months. So that's not that productive. On the other hand, the only thing you may do is to work, right? So in that sense, I'm not sure if it's healthy or not, but yeah, Finland. Let's talk about positive sides. We Finnish are pretty modest about what we got here. So of course that we are close to nature. There's clean air, clean food. there's a lot of space if you don't want to be in the middle of any city. You can find a place to be on your own and so forth. So there's a lot of positives as well, to be honest. And we had a great summer here as well. At least this year, it might have been next year, but anyways, it's short but sweet for sure.
Now, was Housemarque near any large cities, or did you make the decision to locate near a metropolis?
Basically we are in Helsinki, downtown Helsinki. So we always been. This is our, I think, fourth office, and we've just been within 1 mile of this place basically the whole time.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be convenient for folks. And now that the pandemic we're sort of hopefully past the pandemic, are you finding a lot of people are coming back into the office?
Yes, slowly but steadily. I think it's part of the IT people who can accommodate people to come back. But actually, during the pandemic, we've grown so much that we can't fit everybody here. So that's another thing. So anyway, we try to get a temporary space in the same building in the coming months. So hopefully we'll, in a few months' time, have everybody in. So looking forward to that quite a bit, actually.
Wow. That's fantastic. And so, something you mentioned just a couple minutes earlier, and I kind of want to go back to this, is how you and Harri, your co-founder, right?
Yes.
Were in the demo scene long ago in Finland running Bloodhouse and Terramarque, right? The two companies that you guys had started before Housemarque. What was it like back then?
Well, of course, maybe even stepping back a little bit, when I was a kid in the 80s, games were coming from Japan. I had this Game & Watch thing, and then you had some arcade machines in swimming holes and shops. So they came from America or Japan. So never in my mind you could have thought that you would be, making a living doing games. And it was really small, early 90s. Of course, it was there was a demo scene up and coming, and like people started to do things with their computers. So, and in Finland especially, there weren't that many examples of smaller companies doing export business either. So it was like big corporations and very few startups, so to speak. There wasn't, I think the VC funding as such started to happen late 90s in Finland. So there weren't even any sort of a viable way to find out any investments either. So it was like, obviously you stumble in the dark and like what we should do. And there was no publishers, of course. The closest publishers were basically in the UK. So we started to have a little bit of, started to know some publishers there and started to talk with them early 90s, and then we got our first deals and so on. So, but it was kind of a slow process, of course, for us because the industry wasn't there. And at the beginning, let's say 93 to 95, I guess there were like a couple dozen guys basically.
Yeah,
doing games.
I think it's important for folks to understand that back then the internet really wasn't very robust, and a lot of people weren't on the internet. So how did you hook up with your initial investors and partners back then? Were you flying all over the place or driving?
Yeah, no. Basically, when we had our startups, so Harri published his first game directly, basically, so sending disc in mail and something like that. And we got our first deal from Thalamus at the Terramarque. So actually, my friend who introduced me to this business, basically, he was a sort of a bedroom coder back then. So we got a first contact that way for Terramarque, that we knew some of the people and they knew some of the people, and we got in contact and we had a demo that we could sell. So it was slow start, but my first European computer trade show, ECTS, as it was called, was in autumn or in September, basically 93. So that was kind of the beginning when we started to go out and meet people. And at first the shows were basically it was the only show. ECTS was the only place to meet people, and later on, of course, you had to do tours, but it was mainly UK where we traveled the early days.
Again, what a great comparison between then and now, right? Because back then it was about meeting people face to face at these conferences and hoping you got lucky that they were there or that you were talking to the right person, versus today where it's a little bit easier to find folks on the internet and narrow in how you can narrow your choices down.
Yeah, I don't know how we even set up the meetings, like sending faxes maybe. But I remember we had the first, until 97, 98, I think we just used fax machine.
Yeah.
You have a correspondence between publishers and us, for instance. So it certainly is quite different.
It really is. And certainly running a business has become very different too. So after you got your first infusion of cash or your first partners, what were some of the biggest obstacles that you and Hari just faced at the very beginning of starting Housmarque?
Well, of course, we didn't know much what to do. What's kind of the business development is that we were too much focused on just delivering the game and, doing R&D and preparing for the next deal. We just stumbled upon that a bit. So I guess that was kind of the obvious one when you now have all the sort of education and people just listening to a few of these podcasts you'll get up to speed on many different things. But everything was new, like starting a company. Oh, you need to fill the do the books and accounting and what's that and so of course you don't know much when you start. I'm just kind of looking back. I'm just wondering how or not we even got employees, because of course there was no such thing that recruiting in a sense, right? So I don't know how we got people to work there. Can't recall, at least at the very beginning. So I guess it was most like demo scene guys and work passes around. So.
Well, it makes sense. It's those connections, right? It's those personal connections that made such a difference. And I remember the same thing. And one thing you just said that intrigues me is that you mentioned finance. And I know that if you're somebody who starts a company up, you're wearing a ton of hats, right? You're head of finance, head of HR, head of legal. How did you know how to handle the finances or how to negotiate a contract? Were you just guessing along the way, or did you have some background in it?
I guess the latter is pretty much what it is. So, but at least I think we got a bit lucky that there was besides of agreements, we had other sources of finance. So there was this Finnish technology agency who started to provide subsidies and loans to develop your own tech. So starting, I think, 96, 97, so we could, apply for subsidies when we were telling that we are building, game engine, for instance. So there were some other sources, but of course, investment was out of the question because there wasn't any kind of a such thing. And I don't know if we can. Well, we don't need to negotiate any deals anymore, but it seems to be ever changing thing, right? So but at least I think you can cover the basics now. But no, not really. But I think it's just try to use your common sense, if you have any, to figure out what are kind of reasonable terms and what are not. And of course, you started to have some help from the lawyers, and they started to, of course, be lawyers who are used to do something similar, not particularly game deals, because there weren't that many companies in the 90s, especially in Finland. Yeah. So
but in the early mid and late 90s, even law for games really wasn't around. You were working with a firm that had experience in other areas and was just kind of doing the same thing we all were, which was discovering new legal worlds when it came to contracts.
How exciting!
Yeah. So as somebody who has been running a developer for almost 3 decades, how has your job changed over the years?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I think there are some phases. So right at the beginning, actually, we had a natural, way of dividing work between the partners. So Harry was taking care of the development, I was taking care of everything else. And I think at first there was, I even did accounting myself. So that was kind of a stupid when you look back, but we we did a lot of things ourselves. So luckily after a few years, we kind of realized that this shouldn't be the thing I should be doing. But actually, I think what was cool that I was so deep in this, we didn't afford to have a secretary or something like that during the first years. So you can imagine it just doing everything that office work, uh, what makes office to run, and but eventually I think eventually it started to even at earlier days, as kind of mentioned. So even business development was something that we didn't know we didn't know that we're supposed to do such a thing. So eventually, over the years, like we started realized, okay, we need to focus on this more. So at that point, it changed. That my work that it was really cool to start to these discussions on what we should do next and what games we should pitch. So got more and more involved with sort of a beginning of thinking of what kind of games we should do. So that changed, and then of course understanding that we need to do that business development, we need to pitch games all the time, even though you are not successful most of the time, as you know. So you need to do it still every month, basically. So I guess
That's
that
a lot.
focus went, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So basically, you would need to do that, and at least when it comes to bigger events, E3s, whatever conferences. So you would need to be. It's always like a few month
Yeah.
cadence that okay, you have finished the conference, you follow it up, you realize that you have a deal or not. No, okay, then you prepare for the next one and so forth. So we went basically from one agreement to another the whole 26 years. So it's
Yeah.
always like we had to do that. But now, of course, it has changed because we don't need to meet other publishers anymore, more as we are now part of PlayStation Studios. So that has changed, and then basically you can focus on all the other stuff, right? And there's lots of other stuff.
There is. And I think what you just said was a great illustration of what it's like to be an independent developer, because I mean, I've been there too. You are always working on the next deal to make
Yeah,
sure that your studio can continue to thrive and move on to the next bigger thing. But even so, as you just admitted, being now a part of Sony, there are a lot of things that you have to take care of. So
yeah.
how do you, as somebody who runs a large developer, how do you balance your job overseeing the studio with, say, your passion for games? Is there room for both for you?
Yeah. That's it seems that lot of things are consuming the attention nowadays, especially even within the PlayStation Studios umbrella. Uh, yeah, too much actually goes into thinking about games at the moment. How to balance that? Luckily, we have lots of great people here. Of course, you
Mm.
need to have that. So I guess your biggest you know thing you need to do is the most important thing you need to do is basically have great people to take care of most of the things.
Yeah.
So eventually, actually, this is a bit funny that like it took a few years to hire my first, financial manager, and then it took a few years to hire first HR person. So it was like 10 years plus in, and we just had two persons other than me running the studio. Of course, we were small, like 30, 40, 50 around between that, but still. And now proportionally we have quite a bit more and then you need to have ITs, and you start.
Yeah.
But it's kind of wonder that how well we ignored a lot of things, I suppose, back then when we didn't have time to sort everything out. So,
but now, I mean, it sounds like you have been taking a hard look at the organization, making sure that the support structures are there that you need. So, did you ever think that when you started Housemarque long ago, that you'd be doing what you're doing now? And I ask this because I think a lot of founders of any company take a journey that maybe ends up in a different place than they initially expected. So, had you always been passionate about, say, running an organization, or were you more passionate about making games, or both? And did you expect to be where you are today?
Yeah, as mentioned, Harry was mostly in charge of making those games, so I was kind of doing what it takes to keep the lights on, right? So not sure whether that was a passion. Somehow it's like I felt that this is what you need to do, and luckily you were able to do most of the right decisions and most of the right stuff, and ignored the right stuff as well that didn't kick you in the head at some time later. So I guess it's. I have to admit that when there was kind of we started to get more into pitching more and more different kind of games, that has been a kind of the greatest transition in my work. That like that thing that okay, you remember you may remember one meeting years before the game is launched, and even pitched that hey, this might be really cool. You start to have these images in your head, right? So, this could be super cool, and then eventually you build up a pitch deck and you start talking about it, asking opinions, and eventually, if it gets signed, it's super cool. But of course, they're like for every pitch, there's at least I don't know a dozen ideas that never went through, right? So, but that's if one is successful. I guess those meetings haunt you in a sense. It's in a positive way. So, that was great that we started to have these images in our heads, and we shared some common understanding what that might be. So I think that's the coolest part actually of the work we can do.
Of participating in the pitches and going out and selling that vision for.
I mean the kind of the early part of it, right? So talking about some topic, subject matters, how to add things, like some pieces start to click together. That's pretty cool. Cool part of everything is possible at the time, right? So there's no restrictions.
Yeah, definitely. And as it sounds like that as you've grown, right, things have continued to change, right, for you. And if you think back to through your history, what are some of the biggest strategic decisions you've made as a company and during your growth?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Well, we started out as a PC developer. It was an up and coming platform back in 94, 95. So that was kind of the thing that we started to do. I don't know whether that was a decision, but a necessity. As we early had done Amiga games, and both me and Harry. So we got Amiga games published in 1993 and 94. But then we got a chance to do a console game early 2000, 2002, transfer snowboarding. Of course, that was a direction that, yes, this is something we feel that this is the things we do are the right things. But then we kind of had a few rough years during the transition from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3. And after like mid 2000, like 2005 actually was a big revelation, for us when we saw Geometry Wars on Exos Live Arcade. This was kind of the aha moment. We had done a couple of shoot 'em ups for PC in the 90s, and it was like, hey, this is what we can do. We can do really, really well. Do smaller, downloadable console games, and that pretty much started our kind of a great run, like that lasted like 12 years. So doing 10 these downloadable, well-received games, and that was kind of a big decision. And we were able to grow from, I don't know, we were at the time quite small, like 2005, 2006, like from a dozen people to that 50 or so during the next 12 years. So that was a big decision. It was a right one, and we got to do some really great games like PlayStation 4 launch title, Resogun, Next Machina, which was the last sort of pure shoot 'em up we did in 2017. But we saw that like the sales sort of those games were pretty limited. Around 2015, we were like, we should try to do something else, but let's try to self-publish Next Machina, which we did. But then it was kind of the feeling that you would need to do multiplayer games. Back then, 2015, the Call of Duty was super big, of course, and you had a great, Resistance had a multiplayer, right?
Yes, it did.
Yes. Yeah. So you did that back then already. Kind of the feeling was that unless you do multiplayer games, you were out at least. So we invested quite a bit, and eventually, we didn't get to publish it, but we invested lots of our own and stolen money to do that, and pitch a couple of different versions of our idea back then. And then the third one was that, hey, we need to pitch a bit bigger games, and that was kind of why we are here at the moment. So our great 88 Metacritic Next Machina didn't sell enough to justify continuing doing that. We weren't able to sell Stormdivers, which was kind of a title for the multiplayer game, but that, as we needed to focus on Returnal, and of course Returnal went really, really well. So here we are. This one of three options was worthwhile to look into. So that's stuck, and that's why we are talking, I suppose.
Yeah, I think we'd be talking regardless. But
yeah.
What's great is that you're sharing some big creative risks that you took along the way in terms of changing the company's direction and the types of games. I'm going to get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask just one more question about you as somebody who runs a company. And this may be informative for anybody who is stepping into the shoes of running a company. What advice would you give a younger Ilari if you could travel back 30 years in time?
Ooh.
Just maybe one piece of advice.
Yeah, this is a tricky one, right? So I guess there might be a couple ones. As I mentioned, we didn't have much help to do administrative stuff early on. I think you should hire somebody, whatever it's finance or whatever, early enough to take care of finance side, nitty gritty thing, so that you don't need to look at that every day, right? Just once per week or whatever that cadence is. Maybe the second one is to talk more openly about what you're about to do. Of course, we are scared of revealing any secrets, right? But I think still, hey, we are thinking of, like, you're doing that anyways when you pitch.
Sure.
But you could do that with your colleagues. And kind of have a sounding board, like, hey, kind of looking into this side of business. Have you have any experiences? As we all have, probably, have a great network of people we know, other CEOs, other people doing creative work, and kind of reaching out those people early enough. I think it wouldn't help. Probably, nobody will steal your idea and start doing your idea for themselves, because there's tons of ideas we have our own that we are not able to do.
I think that's excellent advice. You're right. It is easy to forget that this industry is full of people who are interested in helping each other
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
we compete, obviously, but you're totally right about the ideas, right? It's not about the ideas, about the execution, and everybody executes
Yes.
differently.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I wish I could have told the younger myself that
Yeah.
same thing. So it would have saved me from making a lot of mistakes. So that's great. Well, I appreciate it. So I want to jump a little bit now to team culture and how and handling growth, because you have grown a lot. So before I get into growth, how would you describe Housemarque's culture?
Yeah. Well, of course, it's based on the Nordic values in that sense. So this is
Hmm.
a very equal sort of a opportunity society in that sense. We have, for instance, we have, I think, the youngest prime minister. Yes, the dancing prime minister. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah, I've seen that.
seen partying prime minister.
Yeah.
So that shows that this society is quite open, and there's a kind of quite equal opportunities. Let's put it that way, and equality between sexes. This sort of a safe environment. So that reflects back to the company things, and like we have these sort of a fundamental beliefs. I nicked that term from what's kind of a sorry. I'll get back to that. So we have this founding beliefs like be yourself or push the envelope and this sort of a thing. So this kind of formulates what we are, and I guess also the purpose is for us is to develop unique game experiences, and that pushes us to do things that probably nobody else is trying to do. So I guess these formulate some direction and that sort of culture. But we hope to think that this it's pretty open culture that you can talk openly and discuss about problems if there's any and so forth. So that's kind of at least the aim, and you know as creative people, passionate people get together. There's always some disputes, so to speak, but
Mhm.
we can sort them out.
Well, when you bring new people on board, what are the kinds of things you do to help them understand the culture and to share those values that you just mentioned?
Um, yeah, of course, the whole process, of course, involves other team members who are going to work with the person. So I guess we can start with that. But
Hmm.
for instance, we have a session. I have a session with newcomers. We collect a few people, then we get into the same room and like I tell a little bit the companies and purpose of the company and history, and I chat a bit and let get to know each other. And
Okay.
that's the kind of one way at the beginning of their onboarding to get a part of the get to know what the company is all about. So
Are there times where you sort of get people together and to remind everybody what the cultural values are? And I ask this because I think we're in a society where we're all bombarded with so much information. Sometimes
mm,
it's hard to know what really matters, whether you're in a company or a society, family, you name it.
well, we have this vehicle. We have especially now during the pandemic times. We still have every Friday update. So that's kind of what the
Okay.
place to tell. Well, typically we are not, of course, not every time to talk about our values. It's more like more mundane things. But once in a while, there's kind of these sessions where we are talking about these things, and we have another kind of an instrument which we haven't been able to use called open space. I don't know if you heard about this method, but gathering people together, posting only a few topics, and then people can go into topics to discuss about those different things they have posted, and we can. That's a good place to talk about about our purpose, for instance, or about mission, what our next few years missions are, and or everything kind of what concerns about being at Housemarque. So that's one great kind of practice, if you like, to use. But unfortunately, of course, we haven't been able to do that for the past 2.5 years. But now, hopefully, we are get to do that in a month's time.
You mean getting people together physically in the office?
Yeah, physically,
spaces
open space, and have this kind of discussion on things like culture as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I also, given that you've grown, I'll go back to that topic again. I'm sure things have changed. So what kind of cultural pressures have growth added for you and the team?
Yeah, that's always the thing we are struggling, how to unify the messaging, right? How to unify these things. And of course, we now have more people to take care of the people than we had before. So we have time to we have invested in that now, and have time to do that. But yeah, what would be the main tools to do so?
Well, I mean, I just to help, tell you what I tend to think about is the difficulty staying connected with people when people experience growth is a big one for us. And how do you stay connected with the rest of the team at Housemarque, just either individually or on a project basis, so that you feel like you know everybody still?
I guess that open space, of course, is one part of it, and we have that these Friday meetings. Hopefully, we have physically that starting in a few months' time, that everybody is coming to the office and we can have that discussion there. Of course, you can have other kind of let's say parties or whatever gatherings to do so. But yeah, those are pretty much the tools, right? So what you can use.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. I mean, use what's at your disposal. That makes a lot of sense. One of the great things about growth and having new team members is new ideas. And you mentioned earlier about all of the different pitches you've made, different ideas that have come up, right? So that's difficult to do. And how does Housemarque approach brainstorming on new IP?
There have been couple different ones. So basically, we had had this open deck. Mike is yours, sort of a
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So there's been few games coming out of that. So everybody can, there's a dedicated, let's say, Friday, and people can prepare their pitches for that, and then they can, present those. And we even at some point had a kind of demo week where if you had a pitch, you would need to try to gather your team, and then you would have some time to work on a demo and further presentation.
Cool.
That was kind of I think we've made a few games like that. Then there's, of course, the main creatives. Like you had a podcast with Harry Gruger, our game director. So as for now, it's more like we just shipped Returnal a year ago, last year, and found success with that. So it's this time for the next game, it's a bit different. So we sort of have the structure how things were set up, especially when it came to creatives, and we kind of continue to explore with how we could move from Returnal onwards. So
okay,
I think it's kind of a bit different for this game, to be honest. The next one. So it's more like, hey, we have this creative team together. Let's figure out what to do next. So instead of having this open mic, open pitching days, and of course there was kind of this pandemic thing going on, so it was quite difficult to start doing those as well.
Sure. That makes sense. Well, through that process, you've come up with a lot of really different games. I mean, as somebody who plays your games, I know I can see the DNA that runs consistently through all of them, but on the surface, they are usually very different approaches to just emphasizing your strengths. So how do you get, or do you ever have trouble getting people comfortable with taking creative risks on the next IP? And if you do, what do you do to get over that?
I think people have been really comfortable, even
Okay.
at least suggesting new ideas. Of course, we've been worked on different genres, as you are referring to. Quite different games like either snowboarding or shoot 'em ups or platformers. Even point and click adventure inspired by LucasArts. But I think it's always has come from people who are, of course, doing those. So there might be some people coming in or have had thought about something, and then she's presenting that to the team. And
Mm.
off we go. So I think we always been stupid enough not to take into account that if you're jumping from genre to another, it takes quite a lot of time to adapt to that. And I think the problem is that we haven't been able to, sell the similar kind of game as our next game. So as as an independent, you basically are tied. If you do a shoot 'em up to one publisher, you probably can't do a similar kind of a thing for the next publisher if you were to change publishers, right? So
That's
there's
an
kind of these
Yeah, that's a good point.
legal things that and that has led us to a wide variety of
Yeah.
different things. So no sequels. We had never had sequels in
You know, that is
27
pretty
years.
surprising, right? I
Well,
mean, you're right. And that's why I asked the question, because it seems to me there is a strong passion for doing new things at Housemarque, which you see in all the games that you make. And it's cool. So with that in mind, with you as the person who is ostensibly making the final call on what you're going to pitch next, how do you know when to jump off the cliff or make a decision with a new IP proposal? How do you know this is the one that we're going to take out and start flying around to publishers and pitching it?
well, I think what we did quite a few times is that we started talking pretty early with
Hmm.
publishers. So that was kind of the business intelligence. So we might have 2-3 pitches, and we started to pitch those, and we would see, that which seems to fly and which seems to be okay, which seems to be like not interested. So I guess that was kind of what started to have not that great deck, to be honest. Early idea, few concept shots, like just very rude thing. I think that was kind of our way of finding out, and then you would start to flesh out if it seems that like, okay, this seems to be really really good, and it went well, and so forth. And so we started using publishers as a sounding board in a sense.
Hmm. That's great that you had that opportunity to go in early. Do you think that still exists today? Can people bring early pitches in and say, hey, not finished yet, just want to get your thoughts on these 3 ideas, and then we'll come back with something more polished?
Yeah, hard to say. And I think looking back, that maybe they were too unfinished. That's why we couldn't get those games signed. So you are not sure.
Yeah. Well, I
if
mean, you know what? It's
that
hard
was
to
the
find the
right approach or
resources.
not,
It's a difficult thing as an independent
right?
to have the resources to create a polished demo, right? Because you put a lot of eggs into one basket if you're doing that.
This is, and you should have your best creatives like finishing off the game you are doing, right? And how or not you can, it's like pulling teeth out of people's mouth, like, hey, we need to have some material for the pitch, and like, everybody's pretty busy at doing their thing, as you know.
Yeah.
So that's always been a challenge. How, the idea that you would have like 5 people free to do whatever they like, right? So as a small independent developer, just like bringing up ideas and work on that. Actually, we did have a chance. I remember we had a 1 year, basically, couple guys doing pitches, and actually, I think we might have done at least one of those ideas that they were able to just work on while they didn't have any development duties as such. So actually, that was a pretty successful in that sense.
Oh, it's great advice as well. If you have the bandwidth, right, to start up an R&D team to experiment with prototyping, that could eventually result in a demo you can pitch, right?
Actually, actually, a couple times now. I remember the other one that we had. Just even one guy, working using Unity or whatever easy tool to, play around with some gameplay mechanics. And Matterfall was one game that came out of that. And then the other, there were actually might have been a couple games coming out of that experiment that we had a couple guys working on ideas. But I think that's, but there's a challenge, of course, that how to get buy-in from the team. If there's kind of somebody outside of the development team, they are working on the current game, and then somebody comes along and, hey, this is the idea, let's start doing this. So that's always a kind of a difficult thing to do, right? So
sure.
How to get everybody on board, how to get everybody understand what the game is all about. I think it's kind of a tough challenge for every developer.
What are some approaches that you've taken to achieve buy-in?
That's a good question. Of course, you try to communicate that with cool pictures and visions you have at that point. But still, I remember that we were, doing some game and felt like they're people doing 3 different kind of games. So somehow the vision couldn't get unified. Eventually we shipped the game, but it's always difficult. There's always different opinions early on what to do. But I think now, I think we are, better communicating the fundamentals. What are the core things on a particular concept. I guess we are better at understanding what should be at the core, and things don't change, and we can communicate that. Maybe we haven't been that explicit earlier.
Okay.
Didn't have the skill or understanding of how to do that.
Well, you're right. That is a learned art, and it goes a long way internally, right? Because sometimes I imagine this is true for you. Sometimes often your most important audience is your team, not a publisher, not the fans. It's the team that really means everything.
Yeah, they need to, need to be, passionate at least, at least interested in some levels. Not everybody needs to be super passionate about, the particular game. They can be really passionate about that, VFX or whatever, they might be doing.
Yeah, that's another really great point, Ilari, is that you can't make everybody happy, right, all the time. No. You can't get everybody fully engaged all the time, even though as leaders of companies, that's kind of what our goal is. It just never happens. But I think what you said was fantastic. If you can get people interested, like willing to give an idea or a pitch or a process the benefit of the doubt, then that goes a long way, right? If people can just sit back and go, I see where you're going. Yeah. Maybe I'll think about it a little harder. That's a win, right?
That's always a win. And of course, I think the difficult part is that you might have 2-3 cool things on the table. And like some people like to do that, and some people like to do the other thing. And like how to decide then if you have limited resources. Of course, you don't decide eventually as an independent. It's kind of publishers decide.
Yeah,
whether they buy that or not. So then it's like that's a different thing. But that's how it is. So even though you might, but still, it's at least part of your main audience, your team is passionate about what you're about to do. So we always been lucky in that sense that we have been doing sort of original games. We haven't been participated in pitching, licensed game things. not really. I think we did a couple times. Actually, we did Angry Birds, console versions as a sort of as a favor as well for our friends at the Rovio. But we haven't really done sort of a license stuff. I think that's pretty much applies to you. Well, except
Marvel.
Except Marvel, yeah. Quite reason thing actually.
But you're right, and I'll get to that in a minute because I think license versus non-license is a really good topic to cover. But you did say something just again 30 seconds ago that intrigued me, and that has to do with the decisions that you make. And it is true, I think, for most independents, if we're getting outside funding, we aren't making the decision on which game to make. It's a publisher is buying in. But you're making decisions as a leader all day long, right? About how to execute, how to take that basic idea and turn it into something that fans are going to love. So do you have other people that you rely on at Housemarque when you have tough decisions to make that can help weigh in and ensure that whatever decision you're making is going to be the right one or as close to right as you can get?
yeah. If you get more, the right decisions right.
Exactly.
Well, we have a kind of we're getting more and more structure. We have like executive team, which is kind of taking care of all the big stuff. So we have the understanding, hopefully have the shared understanding where to take this company, and we have now regular meetings, work sessions. Think about the future and what are the kind of the goals and things like that. So they are kind of luckily quite a few people now within the company. What was great, I was super lucky that outside of company, we had a long-standing chairman of the board. He served over 20 years. Of course, now there's no board in that sense anymore. But I was super lucky to have that, and he was kind of on the other hand, like the person to talk to, sort of a mentor, if you like. So I was lucky to have that as well. So we had a great, he's a great guy still, but had a great chairman. That was invaluable to me, because as you know, being a CEO can be pretty lonely at times.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
Yeah. So that was for me that was a great help. And he's kind of understanding the business side and everything. So it was very easy to communicate, and of course, we're great friends as well.
That's more great advice for somebody who's starting up a company. Having a good mentor, somebody who's maybe not part of the company, who can help you look objectively at problems and solve them, is fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's. I was super lucky, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, going back to where you are, specifically in Finland, something you mentioned early on, really, as somebody who lives in America, I thought was fascinating. And that is, you talked about the winters, right? About how it is dark for a month at a time. But then I think about the summers. You have some of the most amazing summers, right? Because the sun doesn't go down.
Exactly.
And the government, right, it mandates, is it a month off for everybody? Is that right?
Yeah, we are kind of the legislation here is that basically we have a month off during the summer period, and then 1 week during the winter period. So basically, you have to have 5 weeks of vacation, or give your employees 5 weeks of vacation. Otherwise, you'll get in big trouble. So that's a big thing in our culture, of course. And it may sound weird that if you try to call us in July, so you don't get any responses. so of course there are a portion of people you need to be on call, but anyways, that's basically it's sort of the work life shuts down in July here in Finland, so most of it at least.
Well, what a great commitment to well-being, right, from the government. So as a company, how have you addressed well-being internally as you've grown?
Of course, there's lots of initiatives, especially during this pandemic times, with kind of a mental health was a big topic,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
so providing any assistance if some people would need to talk with experts, so to speak. And there's well-being. We had a kind of a we try to encourage people to work out, and of course offering gym memberships, or we have had these fitness tests like started over 10 years ago, annual fitness test. Well, we had a pause now for couple of years, but
Yeah.
fitness test that of course we encourage everybody to take part in. But there's kind of a many different aspects of that. So it's just like telling the message that, hey, you should take care of yourself. We had especially before pandemic, we had quite a few lectures about well-being, like how to improve your sleep and nutrition and things like that. So kind of sharing the information, I guess, is one has been a one big thing. But our HR is pretty dedicated to
Yeah.
well-being of our people.
How do you think our industry has been doing handling health and well-being? I know we talk a lot about it as an industry, and do you think we're actually just spewing hot air, or are we seeing real improvements?
Yeah, I guess a bit different here, because there's some legislation that helps us out, like long vacation periods. I think there's a lot of, of course the negatives comes out, and typically it's the studios in the States who are targeted, as you've noticed.
Yes.
probably know that your kind of colleagues may get a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Um, I think what we are trying to do here, we know that, for instance, during Returnal, especially people were working from home. I think there were many people close to burnout, even though we try to remind them that, hey, you need to rest, but there's no control. That's why I would like to people to come in at the office, so we kind of see people that how they are,
Hmm.
and the colleagues could see that are they doing well or not. But I think what we are try to do is actually one of the our missions for the next few years is to grow sustainably.
Okay.
And part of that is to find a sustainable way of building these bigger games. So we are, well, you're much bigger, but we just crossed 100 people barrier, this month. So we're a bit over 100. They're gonna grow a bit more. But how to sustainably maintain the culture, right? So how to tell people how we should do, and also have a methods of work in production methodology that helps to that end, that they won't be last and surprises that, like, Mr. Publisher comes in and say that this should be blue instead of red, and then everybody are jumping in the air and like have a panic for a week trying to figure out how to fix it. So trying to avoid those things with this production style. So it's
That's fantastic
large
to
scale
hear.
Scrum is our basis for what we're trying to do here from now
Okay.
on. So I guess, and that means, of course, that we have these certain times when we work and so forth. So I guess that's a big part of it. How to figure out how to produce these huge games that are super complex sustainably.
Yep. I'm really happy to hear you say that. I think it's something that all studios have to be thinking about really hard, and think of this is the challenge that we face too. How do you
Yeah,
practically put that into motion? It's easy to say it. It's
yeah.
hard to deliver on it.
So we have this as a basis. We have this large scale Scrum, framework, and we are just learning it. We started implementing that in like a year ago with Returnal DLC work, and we're just kind of moving along, try to learn how to be better at it.
Yeah.
But you have a lots of different rituals in that framework like dailies and retrospectives and all these
Mm-hmm.
planning things. We have a two-week sprints. So this is kind of a natural rhythm where we try to get into. So
Okay.
you have these kind of rituals, and I think the big part of it, I think, is that that during this let's say print, there shouldn't be any surprises. So
Right.
you have committed to what you do during the next 2 weeks, and then you just try to implement that.
Well, it sounds like there's also a lot of planning involved, right? So you're
Yes.
trying to make sure that people understand what's coming up, what the
Yes.
expectations are.
Yeah.
Fewer surprises, the better, right?
Yeah. It seems. Yeah, and I know that all these late surprises in the development, they are kind of costing a lot,
Yeah.
right? So if there's something that we need to change, like Returnal was a particular thing for us. We grew at the same time. It was a much bigger production than we ever thought when we started that. So we weren't prepared in that sense either.
Yeah.
We didn't really have a unified processes and so on. So it was too tough as a project for many.
I got to say, I think every developer goes through that. I mean,
Yes.
no matter what size one is, how long you've been around, everybody hits
Yeah.
that. And it's really great that you're talking about learning from those lessons, being serious about sustainable
Mm.
production. Like that probably is the benefit of being in the industry for a long time, because we've all seen these cycles
Mm.
and we've all been through them. And there's some point where you just say, we got to change. We've
Yeah.
got to do what's right for our folks. We need people to be in the industry for a long time and not
Exactly.
burn out, right?
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
With this basically, well, kind of a part of it started when we had a survey about a bit less than 2 years ago about how the production has went, and of course the the results weren't that great. Of course, there's some fatigue from being at home and that sort of a thing, but we got just kind of proof of what some of us were thinking, that oh no, we need to change, and I've been lucky enough to hire some great people who understand this
Hmm.
side of things, and like our new development director, actually came back less than 2 years ago to help us out in this transition and so forth. So
That's great to hear.
yeah. So, but
Well, and it's
it's
also,
not easy, right? So it's a new thing for everything. So, but everybody. So we've done what we have done is, and still are doing, quite a lot of training for everybody,
okay.
and quite a lot of training for leaders and new potential leaders. So this is something that to be honest, we really didn't do much earlier. At least not as much as we do now. So I think we're just starting to realize how much it takes to bring up the new leaders to the structure, the organization, and how much it takes for individual to actually grow into that position.
Again, really excellent point. It's sometimes, I know it's easy to take for granted for those of us who've been in the industry and have been like kind of self-selected to lead, that
Yeah,
it took us decades to get to the point where we're not making mistakes every day. At least I can say that for myself.
yeah,
I make mistakes all the time, but
of
maybe
course.
not big ones every day,
Yeah,
right? And if we want our leaders to jump those gaps quickly, it does take training. We can't just take for
exactly.
granted that
No,
people are going to be comfortable stepping into the role of a leader and just know everything. It just doesn't happen. So it's
exactly.
awesome that
Yeah.
you've committed to that.
Yeah, and it's totally different that we realized that most of the games we did earlier were like 15, 20 people teams, right? Maybe
Right.
30. But it's totally different environment. And even the game that we had 30 people, we just had some challenges straight away when it passed 20 or whatever. I think there's kind of if you are 15, 20, it's sort of a designers, can keep the game in their heads perhaps.
Mm.
Everything that people who are doing, they kind of know what's happening. At least they should, without any specific structures. Uh, so it's you can you can do it kind of more naturally. But then you start to get beyond that. Maybe it's 20 or whatever. But when you get beyond that, it seems that like things start to fall apart a bit.
Excellent illustration. Yeah, it's that organizational challenge where I think when things get more complex, everybody doesn't have the same blueprint in their head. They just can't unless you've delegated that knowledge, like you've delegated that responsibility for communicating the blueprint and helping people moving in the same direction. I know it. I mean, we've been through that too. So it's
and now
you know, make.
It is quite different. And now with Returnal, I think we had more than 70, maybe 75 working on same game, and then we have additional 75 externally. And of course, this is like coming out from 40, 50 people doing actually 2-3 different things at the same time. So that was a big change, and of course we were ill prepared to do it. And I guess it is that you just don't understand what kind of changes there's going to be in the company when you are there. That nobody can tell you that, hey, by the way, by the time you're 50 people, there's going to be this, and by the time maybe 80 or 100 or whatever, you need to have these policies in place. So what kind of changes? It's easy, sort of easy to be like 20, 30, 40, maybe even. You don't need to have much of structure.
But if you can get it, I think your point, and I totally agree with this, is if you can get it in place earlier and think ahead, then that's a win. And this is why we do these podcasts, frankly. This is what excites me about these podcasts, Ilari, is that somebody like you can come on and say, here's the lesson I learned. If here's the knowledge I can impart to somebody who's just starting up and feels comfortable at 10 or 20 people. But guess what's coming your way, right?
Yeah, but it's always difficult, right, to plan. You just don't have the kind of probably resources of people, or like I mentioned, like the R&D group. So as a 20 people company, would you have a time for 2 people not doing anything serious, right? Everybody else is like trying to ship a game or whatever, do the milestone in order to get paid, and these 2 guys are like thinking there, about this new stuff. So I guess that's pretty difficult to.
Well, if you can, I'll just play devil's advocate with that particular idea. If you can find the funding for those 2 people, right? It really does. It could pay dividends in terms of long-term stability for the team. And the team, if one can explain that to everybody, then that's a win too.
Yeah, but I have to say that's the one thing that I've said to other new when having talks related to businesses. It's like that if you are not willing to invest yourself, you can't expect anybody else to do that either, right? So you need to be able to somehow at least invest something more than like one pager. Maybe we were kind of guilty of that pitching games too early, without too much thought about it. But I think you just need to invest yourself as well in order to make it happen.
Well, again, great advice and for anybody, and especially for newcomers. And I kind of want to end with some more just quick thoughts where you can impart some wisdom. And for somebody who's starting a studio today, what are a few of the key things they must do to survive just early on? Just a couple things.
I think it would be good to have more than one founder. We had 2. So I think if everything is on one person, like trying to be developing business or taking care of the mundane things, I think that's going to be hard. So I don't know what's the optimal number of founders is. I don't know how many founders Insomniac had.
It was me starting in a little tiny office, and then I was lucky enough to find Al Hastings and Brian Hastings, 2 brothers who came on board early, and we put together the pieces for our first game.
Yeah.
But I guess, having you're right, having people you can rely on, partners that you can
whatever roles they have. And share sort of that kind of startup phase. I touched upon this earlier. Maybe coming from doing other stuff, but maybe have, I don't know, administrative, office, finance, whatever person, you would need at pretty early on. So maybe it's fine. For us, it was finance. Then we got HR, like very, very late on. We had some office managers that came and went, but I think some, core service, if you like, what we're calling now. Now we have IT and HR and talent acquisition and you name it, brand even. But I think of course, focus on the essential stuff. And
Right.
yeah, when it comes to financials, I just look at your cash flow. I think that's the thing. I think we didn't have budgeting at Trust. We had a cash flow, so we knew, agreement. The money might come in here at this month. It will end if it's going like planned. And after that month, you need to better find something else or else. So I guess have a reality check.
Yeah.
All the time. I think I've been wondering about this as I think now, after venture capital has come along, I think there are kind of a new generation of entrepreneurs that are used to, raise first, seed money and then continue. It's kind of based on the funding, external funding, before even getting into revenues, like having an actual agreement. So I don't know how people are bootstrapping these things. It seems that I'm not sure whether it's able to get those deals. I guess that's my question. That if you're a startup and have let's say you've been able to put together a demo or whatever in your own spare time and with your savings, is there a chance to have a deal? I'm not sure. Maybe the VC money, venture capital money, funding is the only. Or angel funding is the only way to go. I'm not sure anymore, because at that time it was possible.
Well, there are also new vehicles like Fig. I really, Fig is as a crowdfunding mechanism that's been around now for a few years, and there's some other avenues as well. But you're right. That's one of the important things you got to. You got to think about it really early on, and what strings are going to be attached to whatever funding you bring in. I think you and I grew up in an era where publishing deals didn't require any kind of equity investment, right?
Exactly.
You could go out and find money and retain ownership of your company, which is fantastic. Today, you can still do that, right? But then there are other deals which might offer different pluses and minuses. You might get more money, but you might have to give up some of your equity, and maybe that's a good thing. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a quick just quiz, either or, for and obviously the no right answers, but I just want to get your immediate take. If I'm a new developer, licensed IP or original IP, which one?
New, licensed, if you knew.
Okay, all right.
I would actually now say that. Totally opposite of what we did.
Great point. I mean, you already have a built-in audience. You can probably you don't have to do a lot of the work of coming up with what the IP is. So yeah, I can totally see why that could be get you off the ground fast. Here's another one for you. Build your own engine or license an engine and tools?
Licensed.
Yeah.
That's nowadays. We did have, we put a lot of effort on our own engines for 20 plus years, and now we are using Unreal. So
Got it. Well,
so it's not possible anymore. It was possible for smaller games, but still I would recommend to use licensed, unless you have some biscuits there to be able to pull it off. That depends on who you have with you.
Yeah, and what
caveat. That's caveat. Yeah.
All of these are caveats. I want to explain to anybody listening that this is we're just having fun here and just talking about things that, again, for you, just come immediately to mind. So here's another one for you. Self-publishing versus working with a partner.
If you start working with a partner,
gives you an opportunity to really get the wind in your sails, and right?
Yeah. Again, of course, we see that in Finland there are many new mobile game startups who seem to be working their finding out their way and pretty successful, like spinning off from one company and building up a new one. So I guess it depends on where you are at, right? So I think it's easy. Well, it's easy to publish, right? Just press a button and it's on Steam or
that's right. That's right. That's why, and this is why I asked, because you have an audience that we never had back in the 1990s and the early 2000s, right?
But on the other hand, as we all know, that every day probably 1,000 or more games have been published on mobile phones, app stores, and Google Play and whatnot. So and not much less on PC platforms as well. So that's a tricky one. But I think at the beginning, again, if you have the talent, if you have a team that's been marketing or games, then know what they're doing. Then of course self-published. But I think if you haven't ever sort of dealt with publishing games, then I have a partner. I think
that's an excellent. You know what? Right? It's easy to forget how much expertise goes into publishing a game in terms of marketing, distribution, all the things, localization, QA, all the things that they can help you with. Great point. All right, since you mentioned it, mobile, PC, or console?
Actually, I had a discussion with one other veteran of a couple of weeks back, and got me thinking. Maybe Web3 something might be 3.0 might be something. So maybe not even those. Like I think there was a point that, of course, browser gaming. There was different tools that allowed some publishing even 20 years ago, but they went away a bit. But I think it might be a new era coming up. So
that's actually pretty exciting.
Yeah,
I mean, when you and I were corresponding a little bit earlier, you were talking about some of the you're mentioning that there are other opportunities that are coming our way that maybe we're not all thinking about. This is one of them, you think?
Maybe at least you could build your then you would be doing self-publishing, actually. So you could build your website, you could charge people from there. You wouldn't need to pay license fee or, give a cut to anybody.
Yeah.
You would own your audience. So there's something in there for sure. So maybe it'd be easier to get into something new. If because it's hard to, crack into any established, sector of the industry. I think we felt that you would need to be quite a bit better than anybody if you don't have the relationships or know the players. Like for us, we came from Finland, far away from anybody, and met these people a few times, if we're lucky, a few times a year. But there were like some people living within 1 hour drive from publisher, and they could go in and pitch whenever they liked. So it was quite different.
Yeah.
Different for us.
Then again, too, I mean, what's so nice about today is that with Zoom and Teams and other video conferencing being the norm, you can pitch to anybody, anywhere in the world, anytime.
Exactly. Now it's different again, right? So
yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And what a great time for anybody who's thinking about starting up, because to your point you've made, there are many different paths you can take, many different tools you can learn, and off-the-shelf stuff is insanely good. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And what's awesome too, and I think you briefly touched on this earlier, is that there are a lot of people all over the world who can help you who don't have to live in the same town, right? If you're a small developer and you want to outsource or you want to bring on contractors, there's so many qualified experts who are willing to help you and join your team for a period of time, so you don't have to worry about the structure and the growth issues that come with a central team. I mean, you and we've done it differently, but it makes me excited for a lot of the folks who are just getting into the industry now.
Yeah, lots of different kind of services we could have even imagined, right?
I know.
So you could have those publishing services, or like PR, of course, it's obvious, and all sort of things that will be sorted out for you.
Yeah.
By a partner, so you could concentrate on focused on building the game. So that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing too, just because it's been on my mind, is because the industry has been consolidating. There is, whenever something consolidates, there are always more opportunities that pop up, and so the need for new IP, like you all have been creating consistently, is never diminishes. And I think it's even greater now, given that at least in our side of the business, there are fewer and fewer big titles being released every year. So we need new folks to come in with new ideas and try something, right?
Exactly. You
Yeah,
you're correct. So that's been kind of been on my mind for all these years. How we get more and more new stuff in. Of course, all the new distribution opportunities have provided that you can put your game out on Steam, for instance, or on a
yeah,
mobile phone fairly easily. And
yeah.
that wasn't accessible when we started. It was like you have a publisher who is going to take your game when it's finished and print some CDs and put them in the boxes and then distribute those in trucks to all the stores. So it was quite different, right? So there wasn't any chance basically other than like you mail your own games in discs
Yes.
to people, and that's kind of a bit of a, well, many big companies have started that way, but
True.
it's
It's
quite
nice.
different.
It's nice being where in this era
It is.
today.
It is.
So just as a sort of a last question for you, when you look ahead, what are you most excited about, both for Housemarque and for our industry?
I think we can expect that more and more diversity. Uh, what we're gonna see in the future, there's gonna be tools that allow people to to create things that we've never seen before,
Hmm.
smaller scale at least, as well. What the sort of things like if machine learning is gonna how this gonna disturb the disrupt the industry, that there may be something coming along that way. For us, of course, it's super exciting to be in this position. We are able to you know create a follow-up game to Returnal, and we actually can take the learnings and move them forward, and you know building, luckily, hopefully building up sustainable ways of working, and really have a great company that everybody can. Well, our vision basically is that have a company where everybody can develop themselves professionally as well as personally. So it's a journey, and it's awesome to offer this opportunity to many people that comes to Housemarque to work for us.
Well, right on. Well, Ilari, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that today.
All right, thank you. That it was a pleasure.